And in Framey this morning is Pat Hughes. He's the co-founder of the Illinois Opportunity Project, which is a public policy advocacy group flacking for free market solutions to public policy challenges. And Pat, this whole Zika virus thing is there's so much information that seems to conflict on Zika. You had many world-class athletes decide to skip the games in Rio because of the Zika virus down there. You've got travel advisories to South Florida because the Zika virus has moved into this country as we expected it would. There's cases in Texas I've read about as well. And there's even studies out that say Zika's impact may not be limited to children or pregnant women that is carrying a child, but could have long-term adverse health effects on adults. So to try and make sense of all of this and get to the science, we're happy to be joined by Dr. Tara Smith from Kent State University. She's an epidemiologist and a expert in infectious diseases. Dr. Smith, thanks so much for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. So let me start with the adult side of this, because this is something that is quite troubling. This research from Rockefeller University and the La Jolla Institute for Allergy and Immunology, which I follow very closely, of course.
You should have been a doctor.
That there's evidence that Zika could do damage to adult brain stem cells, and the implications of that, perhaps long term, deadening portions of the brain of adults, or the brains of adults. Is that possible? Are you familiar with this research, and how concerned should adults be?
Yeah, that's a study that came out about a week ago or so. It's in mice. So it's definitely troubling. It's concerning, but not everything that we see that happens in a mouse model is directly applicable to human infections. So it's something that, they're studying, that they're looking at, that certainly they're keeping an eye on adults who have been infected with Zika to see what happens long term. But right now, we just really don't know how serious this could be in adults. We know it can. Oh, go ahead.
No, so what do we know? I know we've talked to you before, and I know the first recognition of the existence of the Zika virus dates back 70, 80 years. But what do we know about this most recent strain that we've seen in Central and South America and now in the southern portion of the United States as well? Has there been a mutation that makes this strain of the Zika virus more potent, more damaging, or do we even know?
We don't think so. We really don't know yet. We're still studying that. We think that it's probably more likely that it's just its appearance in a new population that hasn't been exposed to it before. So the previous Zika virus research took place in Africa, where the African strain of this virus had been circulating for, who knows how long, centuries, millennia longer. Whereas this is completely new to South America, to North America. So this population hasn't been exposed to it, hasn't had any immunity, and is now being exposed, as adults and pregnant women. So we don't think it's necessarily anything with the strain, but just the completely susceptible population that is being exposed to this right now.
Dr. Smith, I read just recently this morning that they're spraying in Miami Beach, they're removing standing water. How effective are pesticides? How effective are sort of the remediation efforts? And should people be comforted by the idea that we have a way to sort of abate this with some proactive action?
Mm-hmm. They're still pretty effective, and they're using some different things locally so that they should know, what works well in that particular area of the country or of the state. So they have, experts in mosquito control who are out doing this. So, I think people that are in those areas should be comforted that they're going out to do these things, but everyone needs to pitch in. It takes more than just pesticides because those aren't going to reach everywhere. So people need to, do some of the common sense things. Remove any kind of standing water that you have, flower pots, bird baths, things like that, where mosquitoes could breed. Because it's really going to take a community response to really try to wipe out some of these mosquitoes in those areas and stop them from breeding.
The report is in Brazil. There's about 1,800 cases of microcephaly with respect to children that have been infected with the Zika virus. Do we have any more of a handle on just how dangerous this is for pregnant women, the incidence of the deformation that results from the Zika virus?
Yeah, we're still trying to figure that out too. Unfortunately, it seems that actually it can be more severe than we even thought. Not only as far as effects in the developing fetus that are severe and noticeable like microcephaly, but more mild things that may affect fetuses even later in gestation. So with other viruses that affect developing fetuses, it's usually within the first 3 to 4 months of development that it's really the worst. And with Zika, it looks like even later in pregnancy, up to 6 months, 7 months, it can have at least some effects on the developing fetus. So we're still trying to understand all of that and still obviously paying a lot of attention to what's happening in Brazil and Colombia and even now in Puerto Rico, as we've had over 10,000 cases of Zika virus there and about 1,000 or so, I think, in pregnant women.
And the symptoms, just to refresh people's recollection, the symptoms are symptoms similar to the flu, right?
Yeah, it has a fever, muscle aches. It differs from the flu a little bit in that there's typically a rash involved as well, a skin rash. But you can have people that are not symptomatic as well but are infected with Zika. So we're trying also to figure out as well, if those people, if you have a pregnant woman who tests positive for Zika but doesn't show any symptoms, does that also put her fetus at risk? And that's something we're also still trying to figure out.
Yeah, and how do people transmit the disease so people can think about how to take precautions just in their daily interactions if they're in a place where this is a risk?
Mm-hmm. So it's primarily transmitted by mosquitoes. So a person is bit by a mosquito, the virus replicates in their body, the mosquito takes, another mosquito takes a blood meal from them and then bites somebody else. So that's how it's primarily transmitted. But we're also seeing that Zika can be transmitted sexually, like an STD, like HIV or others, where it can spread primarily from man to woman, but potentially also from females to males. So sexual transmission is a secondary way that it can be transmitted.
Is the likelihood, just kind of based on mapping the spread of viruses like Zika, is the likelihood that we'll ultimately have cases in every state in the union, that it ultimately will make its way to the Midwest and the rest of the nation? So this is something that's not going to be limited to Florida or Texas trying to deal with?
Well, it will probably be limited mostly to the southern states and the southern half of the United States because that's where the primary vector mosquito called Aedes aegypti is present. That's a mosquito that is not as common in the north. But one thing they're trying to understand is if other species of mosquitoes can spread this. Right now, based on some of the laboratory studies and some of the epidemiological evidence, it doesn't look like other mosquito species that we would have in the northern half of the United States are not very good vectors. But again, if those mosquitoes could spread it efficiently, or if it becomes a large epidemic of a sexually transmitted disease, then of course all bets are off.
All right. She's Dr. Tara Smith. She is on the faculty at Kent State University College of Public Health. Dr. Smith, thank you for joining us again and helping us to understand this a little bit better. Appreciate it.
And thank you again.
And she joined us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.